All right, folks, so we're going to get started with the information. Hope you all enjoy it. There'll be sometimes slides that'll fly through. We do our best when we get this posted up on other channels, such as the website. I'm going to try and get the studies, the links, stuff like that, where I get the data, the information, so you can kind of dive in if you'd like to yourself. This is an overview. This isn't a way to treat yourself or anything like that. I've got to be very careful here. I'm actually going through some issues with the board complaint right now, but the reality is, you know, good Lord's watching over me. I have no problems, because ultimately what I do is I strictly give you information, allow you to understand or grasp or have a better grasp and understanding upon a condition or illness, that type of thing. I'm in no way saying that I am treating any autoimmune condition. I ultimately tell people, and you know what, when I tell the board, you know, when it comes down to it, I don't treat autoimmune conditions. I don't treat diagnoses. I treat an individual. I help an individual understand their body, understand their health, understand how to get it back on track. That's the wellness way. That's what I do. Medicine and just the medical mindset, the perspective of let's label people, let's give them a diagnosis, and then let's ultimately just give them a drug that treats that out of balance, that laboratory number, or ultimately really doesn't even treat the laboratory numbers, just treats the, you know, the symptoms going on. And so I'll start off here. I know that autoimmune conditions are affecting a lot of people. We'll go through a little bit of statistics right away, but I want to read this to you. I haven't shared this in a really long time. This was one of my very first patients, Angie. I remember her. She was a military wife. She actually served in the military as well at one point in time. No, wait, her husband, she had multiple husbands. This is back in 2000, because I started practice in 2010. Her testimony was probably within the first 2 years of my practice, and it was strictly through chiropractic care. So I can't stress enough right off the bat, and I'll give you some evident information to support that in the near future here within this presentation. But here's her testimony. She wrote this up for me after, I mean, it was probably about 6 months of chiropractic treatment. And I'll specifically say with her case, my focus on upper cervical alignment issues was key, because she had undergone chiropractic care in the past, but without the same results. So specific chiropractic care is different than your general mobilization type chiropractic care, in which pain-based general mobilization, that type of thing, is fantastic. I don't want to downplay the importance or benefit of chiropractic in its, what I would consider kind of its more simple form of just mobilization. But yeah, I'm gonna love hitting accept on this. We figured this out next time. So rheumatoid arthritis, that's what my diagnosis was, and I was only a sophomore in college and had just turned 18. I felt like my life was over. And that was that I was going to end up in a wheelchair by the time I hit 25. That was something doctors actually told her at 18 years old when she was first diagnosed. She was diagnosed at such an early age. Her doctors literally had no hope for her. They couldn't even give her hope. The kind of mindset they set into her was that by 25 years old, she'd be in a wheelchair. There was also talk of lupus, and at the time, the prognosis was not very promising. Everything I had read said people died from lupus. Nobody in my family had this, so why me? How did it happen? Where did it come from? The consensus was that it was triggered by me having strep throat twice within 3 months. I had stopped taking the antibiotics from student health because I felt better. The second go around was truly awful. Again, illnesses, infectious diseases can be a trigger for autoimmune conditions. That is a fact. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. So in the middle of my sophomore years, I woke up in the morning with both ankles swollen. They were about the size of grapefruits all the way around. They were hot to the touch and painful. My roommate took me home, and my parents took me to the hospital on post. The first doctor I saw said I must have sprained my ankles because I was marching with the rifle team wearing combat boots. So literally the doctor said, you must have sprained both your ankles in the middle of the night. And she didn't even realize it somehow. It's the bogus excuses. I just got to rant there for a second. The bogus excuses the doctors and explanation doctors give should show a lot of people that they really don't know what they're doing. And I hate to harp so often, but it's at the cost of people's lives, their ability to have children, everything, years and years of suffering. I mean, this title of 50 and Finally Free was because it was finally at 50 years of age that she actually found freedom from this illness in her inflammatory autoimmune condition. So I hadn't fallen and tripped, and it was both ankles. He took no x-rays. He didn't even touch me. He was late for the meeting and left me with ace bandages. I had no clue how to wrap my ankles. My father was livid. He found the doctor in his meeting, and let's just say the doctor got quite a shock concerning his career. In the meantime, a specialist came to me and said, hey, Ashley, come here real quick, and just go ahead and keep accepting people as I read this, because I cannot. In the meantime, a specialist came in and said he was going to probably get in a lot of trouble, but he was going to go over his captain's head. Again, this was a military base hospital. He knew a rheumatologist upstairs and was going to get me in to see him. He was the first of 3 that have treated me over the years. The summer of my sophomore year brought me home with RA, and RA got worse. I ran fevers, lost a lot of weight. The pain was unbearable. On October 1st, by October, I had suffered through 3 major attacks. That's what I called them. I couldn't move. I fell asleep mid-sentence. I had no energy or appetite. My parents would have to do everything for me. They fed me, they bathed me. At 18 years old, this girl was bathed by her parents, took me to the bathroom, even turned me over in bed. I would get stuck turning over in my sleep. They would have to move my arms and legs for me while I sat. If I stayed in one place too long, I could get stiff, and and of course it hurt so bad. I became depressed, wondering if I would have another attack. I had no warning signs. I would just wake up one morning and be stiff and feverish. I returned to school that fall and managed to get through without having to be put in a hospital. That's what the doctor threatened me with after the last attack in October. He wanted me to take Ascriptin, aspirin, and Maalox for lupus and RA. He prescribed 8 to 16 pills a day and rest at least 2 hours a day. I was 18 and thought he was nuts. I tried to follow his orders, lied to him so I could stay at school. When I would have flare-ups, I just did the best I could. I had learned how to just suffer through it because they weren't like attacks, and I could keep moving once I got going. Eventually, I ended up at Vanderbilt with the head of rheumatology as my doctor. I had become somewhat of a medical mystery, and the first doctor was being transferred. He wanted me to see the best. I participated in a drug study for several years. I never knew if I was taking the mystery drug or the placebo. Nothing changed with my RA to this day. I believe I was taking aspirin because of the ringing in my ears. It was the same when I took the Ascriptin. Fast forward to my first marriage. It ended after 7 years, and part of it I attribute to my RA. He wanted children, and I suffered a miscarriage. We had gone to a fertility doctor and found that she was allergic to his sperm. So they did an intrauterine insemination. It worked the first time, but I lost the baby during my first trimester. He couldn't handle the uncertainty of the flare-ups, and after making it through stage 4 B Hodgkin's lymphoma himself, he decided he had had enough. During the late 80s, up until the present, the doctor tried various medicines to ease my RA, felt pain and swelling due to RA, cortisone shots, naproxen, anti-inflammatories, and naproxen, but naproxen, anti-inflammatory for RA, Plaquenil, lupus, RA, which was vaginal ulcers, which caused vaginal ulcers, the Plaquenil did. Arava for RA, which caused my hair to fall out, methotrexate for lupus, to name a few. In the early 90s, I was diagnosed with asthma and already knew that I had allergies, but they had become severe. I also suffered frequent sinus infections. I began taking allergy shots, 3 injections twice a week. I was also using prescription allergy pills, 2 asthma inhalers, a nasal inhaler, 2 eye drops. I was still using all of those, taking shots every 6 weeks when I started seeing Dr. Dale. In the early and late 90s, I had added diseases to my life: endometriosis, infertility, 2 more miscarriages with my second husband, and was hospitalized for a week where aseptic meningitis was caused me to miss 3 months of work. The meningitis left me with residual headaches and neurologist to add to my other doctor's list. I took Neurontin for pain, nerve pain, and 2 other drugs that I can't remember the names of. I also missed another 6 weeks of work because the meningitis came back, and the neurologist gave me a new diagnosis, Mollaret syndrome. I was diagnosed with depression around 2002, took Paxil for a little over a year and a half. I continued to have problems with my period, had a hysterectomy in 2007. You can mute them. You mute them. It was during 2000 that I added a gastroenterologist to my list of doctors and a new diagnosis of GERD. The little purple pill Nexium became my best friend. I tried various other prescription over-the-counter drugs, but Nexium was the one that worked. Sometime during the 2000s, I developed, sorry for the length of this testimony, but I know that a lot of different parts of this will likely line up with a lot of different stories, because I basically right now, I'm looking through all the cameras, people have cameras on, and even the names. I don't see a single man. And it's women, you're affected much, 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 much more by autoimmune conditions than men. So it's like she goes through every single condition that females could deal with. She developed high blood pressure and took Maxide for about a year, dropped some weight, was able to come off the pill. The third rheumatologist finally gave me a name for what happens when my hands get cold. That's Raynaud syndrome. That's a vascular autoimmune condition. He also told me my blood work had several markers for lupus. The lupus is the cause of the skin problems I've had with flare-ups. I get the butterfly effect across my cheeks, nose, get huge red painful erythema, multiforme, splotchy, itchy, red rash. Oh, and my most current diagnosis for RA lupus went from undifferentiated mixed connective tissue disease. Listen to this, ladies. Undifferentiated mixed connective tissue disease, and they switched her diagnosis to differentiated mixed connective tissue disease. When he first told me that, I thought he was joking. Now, here's the funny thing about that situation. So they changed her diagnosis from undifferentiated to differentiated mixed connective tissue disease, and they didn't change a single thing in her regimen. So they just relabeled her, and not a single change in the treatment regimen, drug regimen, nothing was changed. So a lot of times the labeling of people's condition has very little bearing on what it takes to truly heal. A lot of people are going to doctors, and this is the difference in perspective that I'd like for all of you to take away. One of the biggest things is have a different perspective on what you're doing and how you engage in healthcare. Are you going to somebody who's trying to identify and tell you what is wrong with you? When you tell them there's symptoms of the things that you are suffering with, they try and put a label and a name, a diagnosis to those symptoms. But all they're doing really is looking for what is wrong with you, trying to name what is wrong with you, rather than looking for what they could do right for you. What I tell so many of my patients when they're like, what do you do for this condition? What do you do for that condition? I'm like, I don't do anything for that condition. I do something for my patients. I do something for the people that come to seek my care and seek my help. I look to do what I can that is right for the individual, and that brings about healing. So when I started seeing Dr. Dale, I was, as I said, taking allergy shots, 2 eye drops, Advair, albuterol, montelukostat, something for allergies that I took at night, Nexium, HCTZ for blood pressure, estradiol sex hormones for reproductive organs, methotrexate, lupus, phentermine, and appetite suppressant, prednisone, when I had the flare-ups and RA was unbearable. She says, thank God, and thanks to Dr. Dale, I've never felt better. I've experienced little to no arthritis for the first time ever. I was able to tell my rheumatologist that I was at a 0 out of 10 pain scale. The lupus red spots don't hurt, itch. The tinnitus in my ears is all but gone. I sleep better. My plantar fasciitis pain is all but gone. And the burning has stopped when I walk a lot, stand for long periods of time. I walk different. My left foot used to drag sometimes when I walked. And the best thing of all, I'm currently off all medications and life is good. I can't believe at the age of 50, I'm finally free. And folks, that was nothing more than adjusting her spinal correction. So But that testimonial I would see in my practice over the last 10 years, I would see similar conditions, rheumatoid arthritis. I treated a young girl who actually became a patient and then ultimately became an employee for a while. Melissa had actually fallen she had locked herself at her house, tried to climb over her fence. And I actually met her because me and my wife moved into a house in Jolton for a temporary period of time. And my neighbor at the time, I got to talking to him the first time I ever met him. He was my age. He was into fishing, going outdoors, that type of thing. And I started talking to him. I'm like, you and I will be friends, and this will be really cool. Now I get to meet my neighbor, and your wife and my wife, they'll have to be friends too. And he kind of like shunned when I said that, and he said, well, my wife doesn't really get out a lot. She doesn't get to do a whole lot. And I go, why? What? And I just kind of was intrigued. And he said, well, she has rheumatoid arthritis. And in that very moment, I can remember it. I'm standing on one side of an electric fence. He's on the other side of the electric fence. And I literally told him, I know you just met me, but I'm telling you right now, God placed us here to move into this house because I'm going to help your wife. I told him, I can help your wife. You may have no idea how chiropractic can help your wife with rheumatoid arthritis, but I'm telling you right now, I can. And we got her into the clinic. We took upper cervical x-rays. She had massive rotation in the top bone in her spine, which affects the parasympathetic nervous system. If you study autoimmune conditions and now what kind of the medical community and the scientific community is attempting to do, they're actually trying to hook up neurostimulators. So an electrical device hooking electrical wires up to the vagus nerve and upregulate the vagal nerve tone, the parasympathetic tone in the nervous system, which actually helps to downregulate inflammation in the body. And by doing so, it calms down the immune system. So by adjustments to that region or correction of the subluxation in that region, it allows for proper communication from the brain out to the rest of the body, allowing the systems to go back into balance and homeostasis. And sometimes that's all you need to do to tip the scales in the right direction to allow somebody to heal. So I appreciate you letting me share that with you, because that kind of gives me incentivizes me to really kind of dive into this information and show you. Autoimmune diseases, more than 80 diseases. There's in the hundreds now, but I mean, there's kind of classified. Roughly 80 diseases occur as a result of immune system attacking the body's own organs, tissues, and cells. That's what would be classified as an autoimmune condition. And there are classical autoimmune conditions: type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, SLE or systemic lupus erythematosus, inflammatory bowel disease, MS, multiple sclerosis. There's other conditions. There's even type 2 diabetes may be autoimmune in nature as well. But there's classical autoimmune conditions, and then there's other non-classical autoimmune conditions, and somewhat fibromyalgia is in that classification as classical and non-classical. And there's a lot of people doing with chronic fatigue that they would consider not an autoimmune, but autoimmune is highly associated with chronic fatigue. Here's an interesting point. Right now in America, I think this was, you can see it there, August 20th, 2019. So just last year, they're boasting in business. And it's sad when you read these business articles that literally the stock market and people in business and pharmaceutical products, they almost like boast about where you need to spend your money, where you need to invest your money in the stock market. And ultimately, it ends up being in disease and sick care. They know what's going to happen, because if you pay attention, they know what they're doing to cause these issues. I just said that, yes, there are infectious diseases. With Angie's case, the likelihood of the possible, I believe it was strep and pneumonia or strep bacterial infections that may have triggered her autoimmune condition, sent her over the edge. But there's got to be other things that predispose people. And an infectious disease could be a trigger. But the reality is, if we're supposed to be seeing infectious diseases decline in westernized nations like the US with the advent of vaccinations or invention of vaccinations, well, then why aren't we seeing autoimmune conditions go down as well if the primary risk factor is infectious disease? But that's one of the only rare things they'll really strongly admit causes autoimmune conditions. But I'll go through several causes here tonight. But the market for that, if you want invest in the stock market. It's a really good area to invest in, but it's sad that it's literally like, hey, put your money here because there's a lot of sick people coming down the pipelines. These diseases, the rates are increasing so dramatically that there's where you can make a lot of money just by putting your money somewhere rather than actually helping somebody. And then, so I don't invest in the stock market in that way. I would never touch stocks that belong to pharmaceutical industries because I know they're keeping people in bondage. And that's the reality. And I know that some people may be on pharmaceuticals right now as you're watching this. And you know, the reality is there are sometimes a pharmaceutical drug that because someone doesn't know another alternative, they don't know what else to do. They may take that drug and it's like, you know what, it could really reduce the severity of suffering that that person's in. And I thank God for the reduction in suffering that that person has to deal with, but ultimately I want healing that for that person, and that's what God wants. So the prevalence, if you look at this, and I'm going to hammer this, I know that there may be people that are tuned in here tonight that may not know me for who I am and what I teach and what I show, but I will show you the evidence and information to back any claim that I make. And I will give you the links and everything. Once we get this posted on the website, you will get the link to each and every one of the research studies and links of articles or whatever I use as far as resources. Again, I'm talking from resources. But if you look at the different countries around the world and you look at the countries right in front of you right now, from Brazil on the left all the way to the United States on the right, somebody type in the chat. Somebody type in, and I tell you what, I'll give you a choice between reishi mushroom and ultimately you type it in the chat, get on the chat. Everybody get ready, get on the chat. I see Becky over there who's making dinner or something. She's getting on the chat. So get on the chat. If you know where it is, I'm gonna make sure everybody knows. So like if you go to scroll down, typically on your screen, it'll pop up the chat box. Hopefully everybody's there and ready to go. All right, the first person to state. All right, tell me the answer to this question. You'll get either reishi mushroom or Romania, since those are two highlighted herbs. One herb, Romania, and the other one is a mushroom, reishi mushroom, which is both immunoadaptation, both shown to improve the outcomes, both used traditionally for now hundreds of years to help people with rheumatoid arthritis and other autoimmune conditions. It's one of the best herbs and mushrooms, the two things that I used initially to help somebody get their immune system back into some degree of balance. So here we go. From the chart in front of you, I want somebody to tell me what country, and look at the numbers. So you have 7%, 3%, 2%, 6%, 5%, 3% on the Brazil, China 5%, you get Japan at 2%, the United States, the highest was 7%. All right? So tell me which country, and that's the number of people dealing with autoimmune conditions. What country has the lowest vaccination rates? Who hit it?
Whoa.
The people are coming in. Do you see who answered it first?
It looks like Mia? Said Japan right under. Is that the first one you see?
So the first one I see is Nia. She said Japan. Carrie was close second. Most everybody. Brazil, Japan, very low with Brazil as well. Yep. You look at Japan. Now, I'll give a second one. Somebody's going to start. So, what country has the highest vaccination rates? Somebody, oh, Erica, you already had it. You were literally jumping the gun on me there. Nice work.
Oh,
I know.
Carrie beat out Erica.
Oh,
Carrie,
Crystal
how'd
says
you
I'm working
act?
with the app. It's not as quick. Ladies, I apologize. So I'm going to give Carrie, it looks like, and then okay, Carrie and Nia. So Ashley will work with you and get in contact information and stuff like that. You guys can choose between Romania and the others. So here we go. Autoimmune disease is now one of the leading causes of death among middle-aged women. And not only that, if you look up and you watch individuals who suffer with autoimmune conditions, you watch the rates of suicide. It's truly heartbreaking what is taking place in the U.S. right now, especially with U.S. being one of the, is now a leading cause of death. And I think actually suicide is now the leading cause of death in teenagers. And the risk of suicide, and now even depression and suicidal ideation and things like that, they're labeling as a possibility of being a type of autoimmune condition or an allergic type immune condition. So these are all immunologically based or strongly immunologically associated. Thus, if we focus on healing the immune system and balance the immune system, we really see people get well. But again, it's devastating lives and it's taking lives. Amalgam filling is another, so we're going to go through a few causes here real quick. And the interesting thing about it is even all the way back in 2004, beneficial effects of amalgam replacement on the health in patients with autoimmunity. I highly recommend, though, if you're going to seek out the treatment, either utilize myself for protocol overview, and then ultimately seeking out a biological dentist, a naturopathic dentist that's going to work with you properly for properly vacuum, air filtration, dental dams, all this stuff for proper removal of these amalgams. And you need to do it on one side, then the other. Don't do both sides at the same time. I have a patient and now friend of mine, one of the very few males that I treat in my clinic and over the years for autoimmune conditions. But he went to a functional med doctor, and they're going through, like, he's dealing with these autoimmune conditions and major inflammatory conditions. His hands would seize up. He couldn't even open his hands at times, very severe. And the doctor literally said, oh, amalgam fillings, they're horrible for you. You need to get them all taken out. And that was all he said to this patient. And the patient went out immediately, scheduled the appointment, got them removed. And when he sought my care after hitting a brick wall and spending, the guy said he could literally buy a brand new house. He said he's probably spent well over $200,000. And this man was very wealthy. He's a very good businessman. So he had the money to spend. Sadly, he had to spend it. And ultimately, under my care, it's amazing where he's come. But when he was going through, and we were discussing the treatments he had tried and he'd done tens of thousands, like a $10,000 parasite protocol. And I understand that you can stimulate the production and building of the mucosal membrane immune system through exposure, through some sterile pathogens, sterile parasites or parasites that don't necessarily adhere and live very well within the human body. So they're ultimately, these parasites are adapted to other animals. Anyways, I shouldn't even have to go down that road, but that's stuff that he tried. And I literally asked him upon just questioning, and I asked him if he had amalgam fillings. He goes, no, I had them all taken out. I'm like, awesome. How'd you have them taken out? He's like, I went to a dentist and they just took them all out. And I'm like, okay, was there a process? He goes, no. I'm like, who told you needed? He's like, well, the functional med I've been seeing for years, he told me to take them out. I go, okay. And you had them taken out. Did you have them taken out all in one day? And he goes, yes. I'm like, did you have air filtration, dental dams? Were you taking activated carbon? Were you working on the liver beforehand, all these things? And he goes, no. And I'm like, so let me ask you, you got worse after you got those amalgam fillings removed? And he goes, yeah, I did actually. And I said, because you had the drilling and the pulling and the extraction process, oftentimes, which involves drilling sometimes, actually causes off-gassing of that mercury vapor. And if they don't have proper air filtration and vacuum, negative pressure within the room, like, it causes mercury toxicity. And some people are even allergic to mercury. So that's what, in this situation, a lot of times they say it's necessary in people who have allergies to aluminum. They build up antibodies against the mercury. Not only is it neurotoxic, it can be activating to the immune system, it'd be like an adjuvant, but it can also be an allergen, and they're two different things. But they both affect and strongly negatively affect the immune system, cause it to go into dysregulation. So since I have some slides kind of hidden that I wanted to touch on and some that I was kind of decided I would remove, we've all heard that sometimes pregnancy can initiate an autoimmune condition, and pregnancy can actually cause autoimmune conditions to go into remission. So that being said, pregnancy is the joke when it comes to pregnancy and detoxification. If a woman wants to detox, guess what? Get pregnant. It's one of the best ways for you ladies to detox. But the sad thing is that the mercury, the lead, the aluminum, the things can go into the child and increase your baby's risk of autoimmune conditions later in life or toxicity effects. So I'm not giving a recommendation, hey ladies, all go get pregnant if you want to detox the fastest way. Thank you for shaking your head there, a few of you. So that said, your immune system goes into kind of a higher level of immune homeostatic control, and it goes through multiple changes. And actually, they're now finding that what they used to think was, well, they associated and they came to the theory that because pregnancy could induce autoimmune remission, well, then they thought, well, maybe the immune system is really weak, and it weakens your immune system when you're pregnant. So that being said, they thought, well, it's weaker. Well, now they're finding actually the immune system is stronger, but with that stronger component to be able to fight off infectious diseases oftentimes faster and quicker with your immune system, you also have, in a healthy state, a woman is going to have a stronger regulatory component of their immune system. So even though it's stronger with its capability of responding, it's also going to enhance the strength and strengthen the arm that helps to regulate, calm, and the anti-inflammatory arm of your immune system. So that's why it oftentimes can go into remission. Anybody want to tell me what those are in the chat? I want to wait a second here. Any ladies want to tell me what those are?
Breast implant.
Yep. So breast implants. So this will be, I'll be sure to get pictures and video. This is one of the things that we are saving up money for me and my wife to pay for her removal of her breast implants. The one on the left came out of somebody. The one on the right is brand new. And guess what? Mold can literally grow in both saline and silicone. Mold more in the saline, but can be in both. Ultimately, silicone, the silicone lining isn't even in saline. But if they rupture, saline is less detrimental than silicone, but you still have silicone particulates and breakdown. With the silicone lining and capsule, your body can go into an autoimmune condition. And it's well established at this point in time, in my opinion. Obviously, though, sadly, our governmental bodies don't really do. I'm going to read you from this book that's about vaccines and autoimmunity. It's a medical textbook. Here we go. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has suspended the use of silicone-filled breast implants. In January 2004, the FDA announced it would no longer approve silicone gel breast implants due to the lack of long-term safety data. However, in the public meeting held by the FDA in April 2005, it announced it would again consider their approval. So literally less than 1 year, basically, or just over 1 year. Later, they say, maybe we'll approve them again. The following year, and because it was lobbying efforts from the breast implant and medical device industry, so the public meeting held in FDA 2005 announced it would consider the approval the following year, the November 2006. The FDA approved silicone breast implants for women over 22 years of age on the condition that the approved manufacturers would each study 40,000 women with silicone gel implants for a period of 10 years. But guess what? In the independent research studies, one, the FDA allowed for the manufacturers and the implants to do their own safety trial. But they approved it, and now you can study it in the general population. So you don't have to prove that it's safe before we'll approve it. You can prove that it's safe after you give it and make a bunch of money on it. And if you like what you're making, you just need to lie to us and give us false data. Really, really sad, really sad. The FDA is ridiculous. It really is. But not only that, think about this. So in the clinical trial, in the studies, independent trials see that the average timeline, the average years post-implant for the onset of symptoms and problems of autoimmunity within breast implants was around 10 years. But the FDA only required the manufacturer to study them up to 10 years. Independent. So when you look at the analysis of the body of research that's out there on saying whether implants cause autoimmune conditions or not, you'll find that the major analyses, these meta-analysis, say we don't see a causal relationship. Well, that's because they're short duration studies, sometimes only a couple months, few months to a few years, and the trials from the manufacturers, which are extremely biased, oftentimes flat out lies, are only to 10 years, and then the independent long-term studies that support a causal relationship see the average onset of symptoms around 10 years. So you need to remove foreign objects from your body. I even have an implant from a crushed thumb from snowboarding that I'll ultimately have removed. I'm going to skip over that as an explanation of what autoimmune conditions. Hopefully everybody has somewhat of an understanding of that. Top immunosuppressive drugs. Let me say this. So think about this fact. Autoimmune conditions are admitted sometimes to be caused by infectious diseases. Their treatment, and sometimes these infectious agents, these viruses, hepatitis, EBV, Epstein-Barr viruses, Lyme disease, your immune system needs to be strong enough to fight those things off. Oftentimes it's the chronic smoldering infection that stays with the person over a long period of time is ultimately what leads to an autoimmune condition. So it's the inability for the body to have a strong enough immune response to clear a virus or clear an infectious disease that leads to an autoimmune condition. But when you finally get diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, what do you put on? Immunosuppressive drugs. You see, the concept in medicine is completely wrong. One thing I would like to say is, and I know that it goes against, even within the natural world, the crunchy world, saying that you never want to take an herb, you never want to take something that could be strengthening, immunostimulatory when you have an autoimmune condition. I'll say that's wrong. Not never. You need to go case by case basis, and you need to know what the patient's ready to deal with. At times, you may need to upregulate the immune system in the inflammatory arm so that the body can actually fight off and kill off the virus or remove the virus. Oftentimes, you support the body with antivirals, natural herbs that are more antiviral directly rather than immunoregulatory, immunostimulatory in nature. But you've got to get rid of those infections. And if you get rid of those infections, you stop the chronic activation of the immune system that is driving the autoimmune condition in the first place. But that is medicine's way of doing it. Weaken your immune system even further, you ultimately lead to more chronic issues and diseases. Hence, Angie's testimony of just more and more and more diseases and health problems as a result. You got to find the triggers. That's key. That's key. So the big idea is turn off the trigger. Turn off the trigger. Everyone should be, if you know somebody with an autoimmune condition, if you're dealing with an autoimmune condition, you should always be asking, am I seeking to find the triggers or trigger, the major trigger, the multiple triggers that are leading to the switches to be turned on for that autoimmune condition to be present in my body? Epstein-Barr can switch on risk genes. It's not genes, it's risk genes can be switched on by environmental factors such as EBV, Epstein-Barr virus. Vaccinations are well established. I think I got mine for a little bit less than 176 bucks, but if you want that textbook, it's a medical textbook. This is not some Joe Schmo chiropractor or, alternative medical physician or naturopath writing a book. This is literally a medical textbook. Vaccines and autoimmunity, and not only are they causing autoimmune conditions, but they're causing conditions that are autoimmune in nature, but aren't the classical autoimmune issues and diagnoses like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, even though those are causally associated with vaccinations, both in animal studies and in human trials. But they're also causing chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia-like symptoms, rheumatoid arthritis-like symptoms, lupus-like symptoms, but without the same antibodies found in the classical definition of those classical autoimmune diseases. Vaccination risk in systemic lupus and rheumatoid arthritis, a major study published in 2017. So that study was published after this book was written. There is yet again major research studies observing the relationship between vaccines and SLE and rheumatoid arthritis. Here's a government, unclassified government army. This is U.S. Army Medical Research and Development Command at Fort Detrick, Frederick, Maryland. All right, unclassified documents showing that repetitive immune activation, immune stimulation, it doesn't have to be just one vaccine. It could be just repetitively over and over and over and over and over again that these soldiers are being vaccinated with, ultimately leading to autoimmune conditions. If you got cursors and stuff, try not to touch the screen. I know that sometimes we have not figured out how to stop people from drawing on our screen. So now we got a couple little drawings from somebody. No worries though. Autoimmune response following annual influenza vaccinations in 92 apparently healthy adults. 92 autoimmune after annual vaccination. And this is after one example. 26% of participants were positive for ANA, 16% for ACL, 7% for anti-beta 2 GPI, 2% for LA, and 1% for anti-ENA. So before, and then ultimately 24% of the participants demonstrated changes in their antibody levels. 15% of patients increased their level of autoantibodies appearing. So almost a quarter additional, 15% increase in autoantibodies following annual one vaccine, the flu vaccine, which would be given to people annually, repetitive immune activation. Autoimmune hepatitis A vaccine in children, 40 children, 10 of them, every one of these children, not a single one of them had antibodies, ANA titers, had 0 antibodies, autoantibodies found out of all 40 children, and 10 of them within 1 month post-vaccination with hepatitis A vaccine. And this is just 2 vaccines pointing out, but these are multiple different vaccines cause multiple different autoimmune type conditions. So that's 1/4 could trigger the autoantibodies. Now that was found within 1 month. At the end of a year, it remained to be only 2 children sustained autoantibodies. What's sad though is they say that even after 1 year of following up on these children, none of them had symptoms. Even the 2 that had sustained autoantibodies, all right, to their own tissues, their body was being attacked because of this vaccine initiating, being the trigger that turned it on. These children didn't have symptoms, so they said it's safe. This is even a CDC listed study, and it's the most recent study they list. Other ones are from 2004. One of them is done by Merck, gets to do their own. I think that was up here. The top one, Merck got to do their own safety studies. And then 2 years of hepatitis B/A vaccine safety data from adverse events reporting. All right, VAERS, which is a very biased reporting system, reporting up to or only roughly 1% or less of true illnesses and conditions caused by vaccinations. And here's the thing, if you look into the evidence on autoimmune conditions, you can have the initiation of autoantibodies, and then it can take up to 10 years plus before there's unknown period of time, they say, that they could say you can have antibody titers positive, your body literally, the immune system has been trained and activated to attack your own tissues, but the tissue damage isn't great enough to have symptoms, and it could be 10, 20 years down the road, then you have the symptoms. So these studies on these vaccines that last a mere few days to few months, or even a couple years, are completely bogus in relationship to autoimmune conditions. So I'm going to hammer that because I'd rather see people stop causing autoimmune conditions. All right? I would rather save children the suffering than have to heal so many of them. All right, a post-license evaluation of safety inactivated hepatitis A vaccine, 60 days post-interval. That was the study the CDC uses to say they're safe. 60 days. It's junk. Junk. Stress is a higher trigger of autoimmune condition, getting to other causes. Treatment of autoimmune disease should thus include stress management and behavioral intervention to prevent stress-related immune imbalance. Ladies, if you stress, if you have relationship stress, if you have job stress, and ladies, I understand that most of you with children have some form of household children stress. I get it. I see it at home. I've got 3 little rascals, and my wife does fantastic. She's got breast implants, though. Luckily, she gets adjusted whenever she needs to. She was in here today getting adjusted. Her headaches, her migraines, her autoimmune symptoms have substantially decreased, but the reality is she still deals with inflammation of her skin, some level of psoriasis, and other inflammatory just signs and symptoms. So we're going to take those next steps as soon as she's done breastfeeding to remove her implants. So ladies, if you have a husband that doesn't want to remove your implants because they like the boobies, here's the reality. Let them talk to me. they need to do that for your own good, because your health lost will have a much more dramatic, drastic negative effect on your relationship over the long term, being in a relationship, not only during your younger years, ultimately into your elderly years. You know what, your health is more important than his fun, you know, with those. So please, just, I would do everything I could to convince them, because that's the reality where we need to get with men that need to realize that the woman's health is above and beyond. And I know that some of you have husbands that are completely in support of you changing lifestyle and maybe having those removed, whatever it may be. Hopefully you have a husband supportive in that process. Trigger factors should include psychological stress in addition to infection, trauma, and other common triggers. So they list off several of the primary, and here's a philosophy and a statement said by one of the founders of chiropractic: it's thoughts, traumas, and toxins that are the triggers to all disease. They are the causes of all disease. Thoughts, traumas, and toxins. Stress, trauma's physical. They've identified that sudden traumatic spinal injuries can induce autoimmune conditions. I have seen more Crohn's disease patients reverse Crohn's disease after they state to me that they had a back surgery, they had back injuries, injuring their lower spine, ultimately where the nerves branch out to the intestinal tract, then ultimately being diagnosed with Crohn's disease. Shortly after that, we fix their spine. Even some people with rods placed in their spine, I've seen them reverse and arrest autoimmune conditions by correction of their spinal traumas. Other common triggers: thoughts, traumas, and toxins. Went through that all. Allergy and gastrointestinal system, leaky gut and autoimmune diseases, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, the neuroendocrine network, the intestinal epithelial barrier, with interesting tight junctions, controlled epithelial barrier between tolerance and immunity to self-antigens, non-self and self-antigens. It's a fantastic study there. We need to heal leaky gut if that's taking place. This can be from intestinal infections, parasites. It can go from your immune system is too elevated. Also, it could be that your immune system isn't strong enough, a weak immune system. And I'll go through that study in a second. But it can be caused maybe from food intolerances from the past. So removing food allergies, removing the consumption of things like glyphosate, which is well established to cause intestinal permeability increases. And leaky gut is the generic term. Intestinal permeability is the scientific terminology. If you study on zonulin and tight junction effects, you'll find more of that PubMed research. So that can lead to autoimmune conditions. The GI inflammation, leading to leaky gut, leading to food intolerances, leading to more GI inflammation, leading to immune system activation, leading to chronic infections or repetitive infections because the mucosal barrier is broken down and weak, and then ultimately leading to autoimmune. Impact of osteopathic manipulative treatment, secretion of IgA immune system. So chiropractic adjustments, and these are, if you look at the degrees, the doctors, DO, doctor of osteopath, doctor of osteopath, 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 RN, osteopath. Not a single chiropractor wrote this. But it was osteopathic and chiropractic manipulation. That's what they're talking about, removing stress in the spine, ultimately leading to improvements in your mucosal immune system through reduction of neurological stress on the spine through the spinal structure. Here's one of a positive ANA titer testing that we had done on a patient. They had unique findings though. Their ANA titers was 1,280. It should be under 40. Her pattern though, and this is the way how they analyze it for specific autoimmune conditions: systemic SLE and Sjogren's, systemic sclerosis. Those are typically not dense, fine speckled, but she had dense, fine speckled, which would not be associated with lupus, but yet she'd been diagnosed symptomatically with lupus, but yet her pattern doesn't line up with lupus, but then her DNA DS antibody, that's associated and highly diagnostic for lupus. So that's the problem. One of the problems people run into, and a lot of patients dealing with autoimmune conditions, they run into a factor where if they see a doctor that basically goes by textbook, they find these, well, we don't really understand, huge, high antibodies, but why would it be so high? And then they test autoantibodies. And with this patient, this lab actually was so gracious to us after these extremely odd findings. It gave us clarity. It gave us information to help this individual. But I'll show you in a future slide. It's not right after this one, but we did an autoimmune 30 as well, and it was only a very few. They could not see where that extremely high ANA titer was coming from. They couldn't figure it out because there are up to like 150, I think. I forget exact number, but it's well over 100 different autoantibodies or antibodies associated with autoimmune-like syndrome. So you can have an autoimmune condition, and then you can have an autoimmune-like syndrome. So you may not have positive antibodies to your DNA or to your mitochondria, but you could have antibodies to, let's say, going back to the example of silicone implants. You may have antibodies against silicone. And if you don't get rid of the silicone, then your immune system is chronically being and daily and minute by minute, second by second being activated by the silicone being present within your body. So you don't have autoantibodies to your own physical human body tissue, but you have immune system activation through antibodies against silicone. And because your immune system is being activated, you have increased inflammation. And ultimately, just like if, acute infection diseases like the flu, pneumonia, anything, strep throat, the common cold, you get the joint soreness, the stiffness, some inflammation. And ultimately, you have those symptoms. And then think about living with that because your immune system is trying to remove something, get rid of something, trying to kill something, trying to fight something off and remove it. X-rays are crucial for identifying spinal structural abnormalities, scoliosis on the right-hand side affecting the GI. Neural immune pathways, the nervous system in the control of inflammatory diseases. And again, autoimmune are immune inflammatory, but neuroimmune inflammatory can be as well. Chiropractic care with multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease, reversing well up to 90% of people with upper cervical injuries identified. If somebody has MS, but it's not identified that they have any spinal structural misalignments, or they do not have history of trauma to their spine, and these traumas may be huge, falling off a horse, bicycle, a car accident, and then there can be sometimes ones that are so past history. You fell off a bicycle when you're a kid, you kind of rolled with the punch, you got up, you just went on as a little kid does, but that could be what initiated the spinal injury, and then there can be a deteriorative effect on the spine. It doesn't have to be one large, big old trauma. It could be a very small trauma or micro traumas, many small ones over time that lead to the deterioration of the spine. But this doctor doing a major case series, working with a lot of them with upper cervical alignments and seeing reversals and resolution of autoimmune MS and Parkinson's disease. Normalize the immune function. Many women, many people will go through and have thyroid testing. Oh, your thyroid isn't working, your hormones are off. I'll tell you, ladies, when it comes down to it, if you're dealing with hormonal issues, you need to look at the immune system, and I'll show you an example here in a minute as well. But thyroid peroxidase, huge elevated number here, 2,667 when it should be under 60. Thyroid globulin antibodies elevated, 121. So really the conversion of thyroid hormones, and then also the tissue itself being under attack, ultimately leading to it. So this person's thyroid problem is not a thyroid issue, it's an immune system issue. But this is still a test that identifies that where the body is being attacked, but it's not going to tell you exactly what you need to do. Again, you have to find the triggers. Here's an example. GI testing, stool testing. This individual, probably the primary thing, yes, there are a couple other ones with fats coming out of the stool when they should be in lower amounts, either elevated fat diet, but the reality is the biggest one is the very lowest point, their fecal secretory IgA. That's an elevated immune response in the GI. So ultimately that elevated immune activation, something's going on in the gut. A lot of times we'll find intestinal microbiota overgrowth, sometimes parasitic infections, sometimes actually bacterial infections or yeast overgrowth, all manners and all mechanisms and triggers of your immune system. And you can see an elevated immune system, you can calm that inflammation down, you can help clear those infections and heal it. But also on the flip side, the exact opposite, association between IgA deficiencies and other immune conditions. So immune conditions related to an IgA deficiency, this is your mucosal membrane immune system, which honestly is more anti-inflammatory, non-inflammatory in immune nature. So it can neutralize things at a mucosal barrier, and you want that strong, But but if it's elevated, like in this patient here's test, it means there is something going on, which then if it's elevated, it's working really hard. You want it to work really hard if there is an infection. So it's not like you just treat the immune system and try and drive it down. You want to say, why is the immune system working so hard? And yes, the people at the barrier, at the wall, may be trying to keep the invaders out, and that doesn't necessarily increase the inflammation. Like IgA typically is not inflammatory. It's a non-inflammatory immune response. But they can't keep everybody out, and you still get these infectious byproducts getting into the body, which then activate the immune system. So you've got to clear whatever is causing the elevated immune system in the gut, because it's going to negatively impact internally and systemically. But also if somebody has a weak barrier function, then it's letting everybody in the front door. All right. Or I guess if we're talking about a stool sample, maybe it's the back door. I don't know how you want to say that, but juvenile, idiopathic arthritis, it's, you know, and that's the reality. Like, I hate the terms idiopathic in so many different ITP, idiopathic thrombocytopenic purpura. If somebody's writing on the screen, try and see if you can stop cursors and hitting the mouse and stuff, but you're good. Thank you. Juvenile, I apologize. We didn't figure out how to stop the people from drawing on this stuff. We're still figuring this out. Juvenile idiopathic arthritis. Idiopathic is basically that the doctor's an idiot and they can't figure out why. But I would say, listen, if you look at IgA deficiency and the risk of chronic repetitive infections because you don't have a strong barrier and your wall isn't set up, well, if you don't have a strong barrier, then you let in infectious diseases into the body, and then it's chronic repetitive immune activation, and it's well established to be a causal situation in autoimmune conditions. Lupus, inflammatory bowel disease, specifically Crohn's disease, hypothyrosis, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, hyperthyrosis, myasthenia, but not myasthenia gravis in this situation. Bacterial culturing, we look at those, see if what we're doing with overgrowth or pathogenic. Yeast overgrowth, we test for food allergies, looking at immune triggers. Stop dripping, what we call this is the stop dripping gasoline on the fire. Typically, food allergies by themselves are not the initial major causative agent, but they can be what keeps the flywheel moving in the wrong direction. They can keep you from recovering. So you got to get rid of those immune triggers. Anti-inflammatory immunomodulating properties of fungal metabolites, talking about reishi mushroom. Probably one of the best, safest, with the overall immunological benefit is reishi mushroom. If I just said, hey, somebody needs help, give this a try. We do have reishi through the Wellness Way store. You can message us, link up with us, and we can get you that if you'd so like. Prolonged fasting, it reduces, but this is something that's easy, something you can do. Not necessarily easy because most of these illnesses, even such as rheumatoid arthritis, when they're doing fasting prolonged, 7 to 10 days. 7 to 10 days is when they started to see the benefit. But the implementation back into food diet and no longer fasting, people were starting to go back to the autoimmune condition again. You can reset the system, you can help the body heal, but fasting may not always and typically is not going to be what fixes it, because a lot of times you've got to figure out what are the other triggers involved. And again, if you've been sensitized to foods, if you have bacterial infections, if you have chronic infections, if you have liver damage, things like that. Epstein-Barr virus, another test, and this was done by their medical physician, all right? We can test for these things too, but a lot of times I'm like, listen, let's start building our foundational things, the things that make the biggest difference, which is like your gut, your food, your chiropractic care, which is your spine. This individual from Epstein-Barr being that trigger, having mitochondrial antibodies, all right, which if you look at these antibodies, they're associated with liver cirrhosis, liver damage. It's an autoimmune liver condition, basically. Autoimmune hepatitis. Why did I put hormones up here? Ladies, what controls hormonal balance? Almost a pivotal central role in hormonal regulation and balance. Metabolism, excretion of old hormones once they've been through the cycle in that time of the month is your liver. So this person, Epstein-Barr virus or Epstein-Barr infection, antibodies against her liver. Her liver is damaged. Ultimately, excessive hormones in the body, extremely elevated hormones, causing all these problems. So while many will go to, their doctors, endocrinologists, looking for hormonal issues, and then ultimately finding no answers, and just you have hormone imbalance, going on birth control, whatever, and then not getting better, look at the liver. Autoimmune 30 is one of the panels that we run looking at specific antibodies to specific tissues or other organisms, to yeast, to different things like that. And you can ultimately see, using this panel right here, I was able to identify somebody that had an explant, still had autoimmune symptoms, still had infertility issues, because we identified antibodies to her mucosal cells within her GI that are necessary for the absorption of B12. We were able to identify those, and as we correct that autoimmune condition, they see that even just supplementing with B12 in that autoimmune condition can sometimes override the deficiency that will cause infertility. So identifying those triggers is key to turning off the switch to autoimmune conditions. So everybody, that's it for as far as information goes. It's kind of like a fly through information, get as much as you possibly can, hopefully, get an idea of what you need to have in terms of a mindset to start taking control and taking over your own health. I'm going to start to field a few questions here for a little while before I jump off and head home to my great family. This is great. Thank you, Carrie. Estrogen. Yes. I found some lion's mane mushroom at Whole Foods that I bought but haven't tried yet. Immunological benefit, Crystal, to lion's mane. Lion's mane is probably my one that I go with special neurological conditions, or if I want to enhance mental capacity and brain health. So it's a mushroom that stimulates neuron cell growth, neuron growth factors. So really good for kids with ADHD and things like that, or cognitive conditions, stroke patients, individuals that have PTSD, neuron cell growth factors. I might have MS, but haven't been diagnosed officially yet. So Crystal, that's where I would say, even if you're not officially diagnosed, remember, I walk you through, and this book does a really good job at walking people through this stuff. Bella, yes, I see patients online. I do consultations by phone. It's in more of a health consulting, health coaching aspect. I practice and I have patients that travel in to the area for chiropractic care, but a lot of times we will work with patients. I have to work with patients from afar by phone, guiding them with testing, nutritional changes, herbal supplementation, that type of thing, proper testing, everything. So we help there. But what I would say, Crystal, there with MS, even if you haven't been diagnosed officially, you could have symptoms of that condition, but not have the classical autoantibodies that would be diagnostic in way of labeling you with MS, but yet you're having these problems. And even going and getting that classical diagnosis oftentimes doesn't change, because there can be multiple underlying triggers that are leading to that condition. It's ultimately the trigger. It's not the label that you need to seek for healing. I'm just taking it day by day, detoxing heavy metals, avoiding food triggers, and figuring out my next steps, because thyroid is in a constant state of inflammation. Heavy metals, avoiding food triggers, figuring out the next steps. Proper testing. If you haven't had GI testing, that would be by far your next step. Beyond that, I would go into looking at viral testing. Can you, Ashley, what are the questions that we had on the, I had a few other questions on my.
Oh, that.
Yeah, go through those questions that people had posted online, if you would. No, I don't want that. I want this. But can you read some of those? Could you order ANA test, CBC, and other tests that might help diagnose what I have? Bella, absolutely we can. Yep. If you can have access to somebody who can draw blood, we can get you test kits and things like that. You can do ANA tests. We have an autoimmune panel that's like less expensive, but honestly, I skip it typically and go straight towards, if we wanting to test for autoantibodies, we're going to test the Autoimmune 30, which is going to give us ANA, but it's also going to help break down. And instead of doing the preliminary, which ANA is just a general, it doesn't tell you what tissues are being attacked, what tissues we'd want to support. It doesn't do anything in terms of causative problem. other than identifying, yes, your body has autoantibodies. So we typically say, why do that test when, if you're going to spend money on testing, spend money to understand what tissues are being attacked specifically. That way we can support those tissues, drive down what are the causative agents better, support the system to heal, but also then take and identify underlying triggers. So I can walk you through that if you want to set up a consultation. I'm diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in August. My mom also has RA, but strep flipped my switch. I would love to get off my immunosuppressant. Well, then it comes down to looking at, a lot of times if you've had strep, you've probably got other types of strep bacteria in your digestive tract. A lot of times you look at that, you want to look at your other factors that upregulate your immune system, and doing the proper testing into food allergies, stool testing. I'll tell you right now, we can really help you. You flip that switch in the opposite direction, you let your immune system calm down. You know, that's another thing is, you know, like mercury exposure, lead exposure, you look at aluminum in vaccines, they sensitize people. So it may not be the actual vaccine that causes the problem, but the vaccine sensitized you, caused you to, in essence, have an allergy to aluminum now. And people have aluminum antibodies. So they literally have an immune response to aluminum. So when you drink out of aluminum cans, and you have any exposure to aluminum, aluminum is in baking dishes, it's in makeups and hair care and deodorants or antiperspirants especially. It's in all these different things. So every time you're exposed to aluminum because you're allergic to it now, that's a trigger of your repetitive trigger immune system, keeping you in that autoimmune state. iPhone says, I might be your only male. iPhone, only male, okay. About a year ago, I randomly started getting a dry, flaky eyelids that progressed to losing my eyelashes on my left upper eyelid, and the latest has been alopecia in my beard and progressing to my scalp. Derm and HCP have provided no help. The alopecia is they don't, because they're not looking for triggers. That's a sad reality. You have all this information in the peer-reviewed medical literature. Why isn't the medical community adhering to the information they've gathered, understanding the effect of either infectious diseases, vaccinations, chronic repetitive exposures to mold, to Lyme, to toxins with environmental working environments? All these things can cause these things. Why not identify those things? Why not do allergy testing to look at what is triggering the immune system? Do that, you calm the immune system down. I've been on TRS, glutathione, vitamin C, D, magnesium. I already have an ANA. It's 2 years old though. Do you think a stool sample would be a good to do now? Absolutely, Erica. And Erica, if I could use your statement there in question as an opportunity to explain something. I see a lot of people taking things like TRS, which is a binder, okay? Glutathione, you take constituents of glutathione, you don't take glutathione itself truly. But what you're doing there is you're increasing molecules that help your body bind and detoxify. But if your liver isn't functioning properly, if you have autoimmune against your liver, that's where if you have an ANA positive, what is it? What tissue has been damaged? If it's your liver and you take TRS and these other things, your improvements are going to be extremely minimal. And especially if you have an immune activator within the GI tract, or you have leaky gut, impermeability increase in the GI, or you have inflammation in GI, your excretion capability is significantly reduced and your permeability is increased, thus the reabsorption of toxins even after your liver dumps them. So you got to heal the liver. I tell people you need to work on the drain, that's your stool, before you really start to utilize these heavy duty TRS, zeolite, glutathione, those other detoxification molecules and agents. Does the autoimmune 30 help figure out the root cause? It does to some degree, Michelle. So it does help you understand what tissues are being attacked. Certain situations you have where the body has an autoimmune or antibodies towards like yeast, and you want to eliminate yeast exposure. So it helps you in identifying some of the underlying factors that are causal, but it's more specific to what tissues are being damaged. So I'm 100% honest. I'd rather work on people's foundational things testing the things that are going to build up the, like I said, leaky gut, looking at the GI, looking at the stool. If you can help the gut be healthier, I'm telling you right now, like I would say, don't test autoantibodies until you test the stool, because antibodies could come as a result of the digestive tract's health. And if the digestive tract has an infection, if it has overgrowth, if it has a yeast, if it's inflamed or the immune system is completely weak and you need to build that back up, well, then guess what? You can know what's being attacked, but then you're going to have to test more to figure out what you need to do to stop the attack. But meanwhile, that attack, though, and I say if you want to do all the testing, you know, it would be the autoimmune panel 30. It would be the stool test. It would be the food allergy. And those 3 tests all together, you know what tissue specifically you're being attacked. Again, it's called the autoimmune 30 because it tests 30 things. We picked the most frequent ones, all right? Because if we tested well over 100, you're looking at probably well over $1,000 for a single test to look at every single little itsy bitsy, you know, autoimmune. And that stinks because we are at the mercy of trying to do things that are financially feasible for our patients and things, but that enables us to know what tissues need supported. So I've been good results with high dose vitamin D on MS symptoms. It's immunomodulatory. Really, that hormone vitamin D is extremely immunomodulatory. So that is one of the most simple supplements for somebody to take. Have results from a full functional medicine test profile, but don't really know what to interpret it. So iPhone, what I would say is if you've had functional medicine testing but don't know how to interpret it, you can bring those test results to me. We can set up a consultation for that. That would not be in the 15-minute. If I have to go over test results and tests and labs from other people, that would be a test result read. So depending, you can send it over and I can assess it really quickly on what level of in-depth kind of reading and educating myself on your situation I need to do, and then I can tell you what level of consultation you would need. My Wellness Way doc has not suggested this test, and I'm interested. Awesome, Michelle. Glad to hear that. Yeah, I mean, again, it's like I said, I will walk people through, like I'll tell people oftentimes, listen, if you can give me a hormone panel, if you can give me an autoimmune panel, if you can give me a viral panel, if you can give me a stool panel, if you can give me a food allergy, you can give me your spinal x-rays and we can do heavy metal chelation testing, challenge in both. I'm like, that's, I had a buddy that went to a functional med doc before I started doing all this, spent well over $4,500 basically just to get in the door. And in that $4,500, they incorporated testing. But a lot of the tests were $50 to $100, $200 at times. And then ultimately, I'm like, they're testing deficiencies, but they're not testing properly the gut. And it was just, you know, I hated seeing my buddy do that because of his autoimmune. He had hyperthyroidism. I mean, he went back and forth from hyper to hypo, having thyroiditis, Hashimoto's. And he just wanted help, and that's sadly what many people go through. So,
my turn?
Go ahead.
Okay. Eczema in unvaccinated babies.
Okay. So prior to this, we asked if people had questions and things like that. Somebody asked a question about, I have a child with eczema, but they were unvaccinated. So here recently, dealing with a patient with their baby breaking out, having a degree of eczema. They went in, they said they did allergy testing on their baby. And I looked at her and I said, so what's your baby eating? And she goes, well, he's exclusively breastfed. And in this situation, I believe this mother was saying her child was unvaccinated, exclusively breastfed. And I said, okay, so why'd you do allergy tests on your child? She's like, because we're trying to figure out what causes the eczema. And we heard that food allergies could cause eczema. I'm like, yes, but your child's not eating food. It's a different perspective. That's one of the most important things that I think the majority of Wellness Way docs will bring to you. All right. Myself included. I looked at her, I said, why didn't you test your food allergies? Because your baby's immune system right now. If your body and you're sensitized to the food proteins, you test your immune system, you test your food allergies, you get rid of the triggers of your immune system, you reduce your inflammatory response, and guess what? Baby's skin clears up. That's one of the easiest ways in that situation. It's normally mom's immune system is the one that's triggering the eczema in a breastfed, non-vaccinated baby. So We're now trying to figure out why she is still having stomach issues in at least a week, has lower bowel symptoms of fever for just a few short hours, and then completely fine. She probably had celiac longer, what we found out. How often do celiac clients end up with IBS or Crohn's? Extremely frequently. I don't know if it's 30, what percentage of celiac will eventually go to Crohn's, but you've got to get rid of those. And oftentimes, again, aluminum allergies can lead to celiac, different things like that. So you go back to what are the triggers of that. It's an autoimmune. I was told I have celiac, but later showed inconclusive after second biopsy. I found out I have Lyme, and now that's what could be causing the classic celiac symptoms. Does this sound right? Yes, Lyme disease is one of the ones that can happen and occur in multiple different areas, regions, organ systems of the body. And again, it is one of those immune regulators where your immune system can't clear it. It stays there, it smolders, it triggers inflammation, tissues start being degraded, damaged. Lyme then can infect those cells even easier because they're weakened. You've got to actually strengthen your immune system, but help your body regulate the anti-inflammatory and upregulate both the strength of your immune system to kill off a pathogen like Lyme, but also help regulate at the same time with its anti-inflammatory process. Yep, go ahead, Ashley.
So this is some people are accidentally sending me private questions.
Okay.
But they're not meaning to. But I thought you should read this one.
I've been diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is remission with Remicade infusions. I also elevated thyroid antibodies, fibromyalgia, and migraines. Wow. So I'll tell you, your case with the multiple different autoimmune conditions, fibromyalgia, those things, it's a neuroinflammatory immune system issue you got going on. I have probably, if I said the two conditions I see the most benefit with straight up chiropractic care is Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis are two big ones that I see amazing results with just chiropractic care. So highly recommend that for that individual who just asked that question to Ashley. But again, the other trigger testing I would recommend as well. I want to be on thyroid. I don't want to be on thyroid meds anymore, and I know we need to see a Wellness Way doc. I can't afford insurance, meds, Wellness Way, and supplements. So that's why it hasn't happened yet. I appreciate you sharing that stuff, and I know it is thyroid meds completely. You see people come off thyroid meds. Have you seen people? Yes, I have. Thyroid med need is one of the most frequent things that we eliminate for people. It's an immune system issue. That's where, Rebecca, I would say I would love to work with you, because I know that sometimes even within the Wellness Way, I prefer personally to approach it of, if a person's suffering, I want to figure out what I can set up foundationally for the individual, spend money on the tools that help them get well and build their immune integrity, build up their system, build up their healing potential, ultimately leading to improvements. And then we can dial in as finances get there, and they can test the autoimmune markers. They can test for viral, or they can test for active continued chronic Lyme disease, things like that. Those aren't my first go-to. Is not the test necessary to label or diagnose. My first tests are the things that I know are going to help the person build a strong foundation and begin the healing process and see improvements, get excited about getting well. And oftentimes it leads to resolution and improvements to the point where when we test finally, or they just go back to their general practitioner and their insurance covers their thyroid test and they look, oh, wow, your antibodies back down so low. Your thyroid numbers are looking great. Now you're being over medicated. Now we can take you off your medicine. So that's my approach, and it oftentimes saves some money for individuals in situations like that. And I am one practice, I can't speak for all, but the majority of our Wellness Way docs are willing to help you in situations where, payment plans and things like that for long-term care, if necessary. The first neurologist I saw, this is Crystal, said that I might have it due to lesions they found on my brain from my brain MRI because I didn't look sick. They didn't want to do additional testing. On top of many other things, neurologist decided opinion. Neurologist definitely will be getting a consultation with the awesome Nancy. I have MCT, D lupus, arthritis. My number has stabilized, except my sedentary rate. It remains 130. Go ahead. I've been diagnosed with Crohn's disease, remission, rheumatoid infusions. Yeah. I'm on small dose Plaquenil. I would like to set up a consult there.
That's me.
Yeah. Reading questions here, trying to go through things. Grad student nursing school, given multiple vaccines in the program. Since then, I've developed eczema, fatigue, GI, joint pain in my fingers and ankles, and mild red skin on my cheeks. It's like pink, dry, and a little itchy. A little bit itchy at times. You get the picture. I'm suspecting lupus, but want to have a clear answer. I will make sure to contact you. Consultation. Feel so stuck. I look forward to helping you. Carrie, can you share how much those 3 tests cost together? So do you have can you grab the cost sheet real quick? Ashley's going to grab the cost sheet. I always say the women in my life take care of all the money issues. I've got women in my office that help me out. They take the money for me, and I go home and I have to go home to one that takes it all from me, which is partly because I've got to pay for her breast implants to be removed. I tried to convince her dad. Her dad was actually the one who gifted those to her. And I'm like, I need her dad to be convinced. I know. I see Becky's like jaw dropped over there. I'm like, I want to be like, you paid for him. You paid for him to be removed. And he's like, no, you married her.
All right, which ones were they wondering?
All right. So if we're looking at, so the Wellness Way IgG 110 foods and basic IgE, you're looking at $275 for that one for the lab cost alone. We typically do, and within that, there would be the 15-minute consultation for you all, because typically we do a $75 charge for lab result for that one if they just did that one alone. That's food allergy, that's blood work. We're looking at, where's the GI? Is that the GI blood? No. Comprehensive stool, 3-day, you're looking at $295 for the lab. And this is lab costs, and then test result reads and things like that are typically $350 for first one. You look at the autoimmune 30 on this one, that's $289 for that lab. And those are what the lab charges. You pay me for my coaching, you pay the labs for theirs. Give you examples though. I know that those costs are still in several $100s, but I've had patients who I've recommended these are the things we need to do. They ultimately go to their medical doctor trying to get these labs or these immune panels or hormone panels, and they'll literally be quoted upwards of $600 to $700 to $1,000 for an individual test. One of those tests. Like the stool sampling or when you look at the degree, and a lot of times they'll go, oh, we can do stool sample, and they check for like 3 pathogens and like 1 or 2 parasites, and that's it. They don't even look at the mycology. They don't look at the immune system. They don't look at all the other factors that can be derived from the lab testing that we do with stool testing through Genova. So hormone panels, things like that, like ours is $250 for a Dutch test. A patient of mine was quoted $620 through a functional med doc for just the laboratory cost. And then she contacted Dutch, and they said it's typically $600. The Wellness Way is able to drive down the lab costs on many of the different labs because of the collective buying power. I know that we got like 29 new messages. I'm not going to be able to get to all of these. Where you might start to work on the liver. No, I have MTHFR. I would be eating tons of cruciferous vegetables. I had started fatty liver. Milk thistle and dandelion. If you're a female, Jenna, I believe you would be with that name. So I would do Schisandra first. Start off with Schisandra before you push the liver detoxification pathways too much. It's probably one of the best adaptogenic herbs for the liver, Schisandra. But if you know you have liver damage, milk thistle is a big time crucial one. Will this webinar be available to watch later? Yes, it will be.
I'll be sending everyone the YouTube link.
You get YouTube link in the future when Ashley has it up on there. Would hormonal migraines be a neuroinflammatory autoimmune issue? If so, how to remedy? Typically, you're going to work on detoxification pathways for hormonal issues. I'll see. So in your situation, the Schisandra, for the person I just mentioned, for liver and stuff, we do have all of those herbs. So if you guys appreciate the information, you got value from it, I'm giving you some free recommendations here, just tips and stuff. If you get that stuff through the doctor's website, wilddoc.com has a doctor's website, but there's also, if you contact us through the Wellness Way store, there's a doctor affiliate code when you purchase supplements through them. And they're liquid herbs. They're far, far more medicinal than your powdered forms, and the concentration, the medicinal properties are much more extracted in alcohol elixirs and tinctures. So I would look at that. Again, hormonal migraines oftentimes are a liver issue, okay? But migraines in itself, you also have a causative factor with upper cervical misalignments almost every single time. If it's migraines being triggered by hormonal problems or a hormonal issue going through your cycle, monthly cycles, your period, well, a lot of times I'm looking at long-term working on liver, but short-term what sees the quickest benefit is typically realignments of the upper cervical spine, because that is a primary cause with migraines. So correction of that typically brings a lot of relief. 30-plus year Crohn's disease diagnosis have handled it with pretty much successfully with diet, but when stressed for a duration of flares, why? And what can I do to stop a flare under stress? California poppy, Amy. Amy, California poppy is a stress adaptogen herb. So again, we have that in liquid. I would highly recommend you utilize that in that situation. I did want to say that and mention that herb because it's not immunoregulatory, but it's more of a adaptogen for your stress hormones, and stress helps your body deal and regulate the stress responses, ultimately not leading to that immune dysregulation that can occur during stress. So hopefully that helps you out, Amy. Do you recommend seeing a neurologist to monitor MS progression? I stopped seeing one after I stopped at Red Biff, started high dose D, CBD, went gluten, dairy free. That kind of rhymed. He wanted me to start low dose chemo, even though after I was doing better. Yeah, a lot of times, I mean, I had a Graves' disease, a 9-year-old girl, when she was 14, finally we had her Graves' disease completely into remission. And she even went back and antibodies were in normal ranges. And the doctor was like, we still need to cut it out. He's like, and this is a Vanderbilt doctor, one of the top medical facilities in the nation. You know, Children's Hospital, Vanderbilt, they're basically like, let's just cut their thyroid out because it's going to come back. She's been in remission. She's, you know, I forget how old she is now. But it's just sad, like that situation. You were doing better and you emphasize that. Hopefully you emphasize that with just CBD and high dose vitamin D, and you weren't on the meds and they want to do chemotherapy still. That's because they don't care, but they want you to be on their drugs, and they hate admitting when something natural was superior to what they were taught was the only way to treat that condition. Thank you for all the information. Extremely helpful, Crystal says. Nico, will we be able to watch replay? Yes. Once again, great info. All right. So I think I hit all the questions. I appreciate all. I hope you were blessed by the information. I do. I hope you take this information, though. Utilize it. I hope to speak with many of you that need my help. I hope you're all blessed with that. I do appreciate anyone who goes to the Wellness Way store or the Wild Doc store, supporting me and my family financially as I give you this information. But I would love to hear in the future if you are blessed by any of the information, and if you've made changes and you improve on your own, even if it isn't, just shoot us a message through Facebook, or even if it's email, and say, hey, I implemented some of the changes on my own in your webinar, and these are the improvements I've seen so far. I love hearing testimonies from the things that because that's why I do this. I want to hear your praise, and I want to hear that. And ultimately, my belief is that I'm doing this and showing you the medicines God's created for you. And through that, I hope that you see the love of Jesus Christ for each and every one of you. I believe the Bible to be true from the beginning to the end of time, and the beginning and the end of the Bible. And I'll tell you what, in Ezekiel 47, it says, let fruit be for food and leaves be for medicine. All right. He provided the medicines for us that we need. And ultimately, if we read the scriptures, we understand that, you know what, if I can show a patient, if I can show a person, here's an herb, God created you to deal with the stress you're under right now so that you don't have another flare up. And it's called California poppy. Well, it's not me who you need to thank, it's God, because he's the one who created that herb. And I hope you understand that. And that would be the best thing that I could ever give to you, is just more understanding that the Bible is true and God loves you and he's provided for you. So, all right, everybody, I love you. Bless you all. Have an amazing evening and share the truth. Don't just like it, because that's the way we save lives.